There is a specific kind of silence that happens about 45 minutes into a first date. The conversation online was easy. You were interesting. She was responsive. The messages had rhythm, wit, a little tension. You felt like yourself, maybe more like yourself than you had in years. And then you sat across from each other in a restaurant, or at a coffee bar, or at a wine place she suggested. And something shifted. Not dramatically, not rudely, just quietly. The energy changed. She became slightly more formal. You became slightly more aware of yourself. And by the time you left, you both knew the next message was probably not coming. If you are a man in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, and this has happened to you more than once, it was not bad luck. It was not chemistry mismatch. And it almost certainly was not the venue. It was a transition problem. And transition problems have specific causes and specific corrections. Today, we are going to break down exactly what happens psychologically when a connection built through messages attempts to become a connection built in person, why that transition is harder for mature men and age gap dynamics specifically, and what the three most common first date errors are and how to correct each one before the night begins. Stay with me through the full video. The third error is the one almost nobody talks about, and it is the one that ends the most promising connections before they have a chance to begin. When two people communicate through messages, they are building a version of each other. Not a false version, but an edited version. A version where the timing is controlled, the pauses are invisible, and the slight nervousness in a reply never gets sent. This is not deception. This is how written communication has always worked. The difference in modern dating is that the edited version is often built across weeks before the in-person version ever shows up. For a mature man in an age gap dynamic, this creates a specific tension worth naming directly. Online, the age difference is largely invisible. Your messages carry the same weight as any other interesting man's messages. She is responding to your perspective, your humor, your references, the quality of your attention. She is not calculating anything. In person, all of that arrives at once. This is not a fatal problem. Plenty of connections navigate it without difficulty. But it is a real dynamic, and pretending it does not exist is part of what causes the 45-minute silence. The men who handle this transition well are not necessarily the most confident in the traditional sense. They are the ones who understand what actually changed when they walked through the door, and they respond to what is in front of them, not what was in the phone. Before we get into the three specific errors, one question for the comments. When you go from messaging to meeting someone for the first time, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does your energy change? 1 means you feel exactly the same in person as you do in messages. 10 means you feel like a completely different person. Drop your number below. I read every comment. The first error is one of the most common, and it makes intuitive sense, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. You have been talking to this woman for 2 or 3 weeks. You know things about her. She knows things about you. You have a shared vocabulary, a couple of inside references, a rhythm. Walking into the first meeting, it feels natural to continue that rhythm, to pick up where the messages left off. The problem is she is not picking up where the messages left off. She is starting something new. Consider a man, we will call him Daniel, 54, recently separated, 3 weeks into exchanging messages with a woman he met through a dating app. The messages have been genuinely good. He has been thoughtful, grounded, specific. She has been warm, curious, engaged. He walks into the wine bar feeling good about this one. She is already seated when he arrives. He sits down and almost immediately references something she said 4 days ago in a message, a specific detail about a project at work, wanting to show her he had been paying attention. She smiles, gives a brief answer, and then goes slightly quiet. He did nothing wrong in that moment. He was being attentive, but he oriented to the digital version of her before he oriented to the physical one. He arrived in the room, still inside the conversation thread. She was waiting to be seen as she was sitting there in that space on that evening. The correction is simple but requires discipline. The first 10 minutes of a first meeting are an arrival, not a continuation. You are not resuming a conversation. You are beginning a presence. That means slowing down, making genuine eye contact, commenting on something real and immediate, the space, the neighborhood, something she orders, not referencing the archive. Let the conversation find its own rhythm from the room you are actually in. The second error is rooted in something that is generally a strength in mature men, and it becomes a liability in this specific context. Self awareness turned inward during a social interaction becomes self monitoring, and self monitoring is one of the most well documented ways to drain presence from a room. This is not a new observation. Social psychologist Mark Snyder introduced the concept of self monitoring in 1974, and decades of research since have confirmed the pattern. When a person shifts their attention away from the external interaction and toward their own performance within it, tracking how they are coming across, recalibrating their posture, wondering if the last sentence landed, they become less responsive to the actual cues in front of them. The interaction starts to feel slightly effortful, slightly managed. The other person usually cannot name what is off, but they feel it as a form of distance. Now consider a different version of Daniel. Same evening, same wine bar. But this version spent the 30 minutes before the date rehearsing. He has a mental list of topics, a few prepared lines, things to avoid. He arrives ready. The date goes competently. He is engaging. He hits his marks. She tells her friend later that he was nice, but something felt a little off. She felt like she was on a performance review rather than a date. What she was responding to was the effort, not the person behind it. The shift here is psychological rather than behavioral. The goal of a first date is not to be impressive. The goal is to be genuinely present, curious enough about her that she stops evaluating and starts simply being there. When a person is truly engaged in a conversation, they are not running a compatibility checklist. They are just present. Your job is to make it easy for her to be present, and that requires you to actually be there first. The third error is the one almost nobody discusses, and it is worth spending real time on. The age gap does not disappear because you do not mention it. It is in the room from the moment you sit down. She is aware of it. You are aware of it. The question is not whether it is present. The question is whether it creates low-level tension across the entire evening, or whether it gets addressed naturally early on and stops being a thing. Most mature men choose what they believe is a third option. They say nothing and assume that confidence means never making it an issue. This is well-intentioned. It is also partially misleading. There is a meaningful difference between making the age gap a problem and acknowledging it like an adult. Making it a problem looks like apology. Phrases that put her in the position of having to reassure you, which shifts the emotional weight of the entire evening onto her shoulders. Nobody wants to spend a first date managing someone else's insecurity, but acknowledging it like an adult looks completely different. It is a brief, warm, confident moment, usually within the first 20 minutes, that does not require her response, does not ask for her permission, and does not treat the difference as something to overcome. It treats it as simply part of what makes the situation genuinely interesting. It might be a moment of real curiosity about how she has come to think about something differently than you have, given where each of you has been in terms of timing and experience. Or it might be a comment that acknowledges the gap without performing anxiety about it. Light enough that it passes, substantial enough that it clears the air. The men who do this well are not minimizing the difference, they are owning it. They are communicating without words that they have thought about this clearly and it does not make them uncomfortable. That specific kind of ease is not something that can be faked. It either comes from having genuinely worked through it or it does not come at all. Here is what a successful digital to in-person transition actually looks like when it works. A man arrives 5 minutes early. He finds a seat, orders a water, and puts his phone face down. He sits with the room for a few minutes, not reviewing talking points, just arriving. When she walks in, he stands, makes genuine eye contact, and says something brief and honest about the space. Not a compliment designed to land, just a real observation, something he actually noticed. The first question he asks is open, and then he actually listens to the answer, not waiting for his turn. Listening. Following what she says into the next question the way a conversation naturally moves when both people are actually there. When the age gap surfaces, It always does in some small moment. He handles it with a light touch. He does not perform ease, but he has it. By the end of the evening, she does not feel like she was on a date. She feels like she was in a real conversation with someone who was actually present. Now contrast that with a version where a man arrives on time, prepared. He references the messages early. He asks good questions at a slight remove, the questions of someone evaluating rather than connecting. He manages the evening competently. But at no point does she feel like she can fully exhale. At no point does the evening become genuinely easy. She goes home and tells herself it was fine. She does not feel urgency about the next one. Both of these men made an effort. Both of them are decent. The difference between them has almost nothing to do with age, appearance, or income. One man arrived, the other man performed. Three practical things to do before any first meeting. The first is to set the frame before you walk in. This is not visualization in a motivational sense. It is a simple decision you make consciously. You are going into this evening to be genuinely curious about a person, not to be evaluated, not to evaluate, just to spend a couple of hours paying real attention to someone. That is the only goal. Everything else follows from it or it does not. The second is to arrive early enough to settle. The shift from transit mode to presence takes a few minutes. If you walk in while still in motion, still processing the commute, still on your phone, still running through something from your day, you are not fully there yet and she will sense it. 5 minutes alone in the venue before she arrives without your phone changes your energy meaningfully by the time she walks through the door. The third is to have one genuine observation ready about where you are. Not a line, not something rehearsed, just something you actually notice about the space, the way the room is laid out, something on the menu that is unexpected, the neighborhood you are in. One small, real observation is worth more than 45 minutes of polished talking points because it signals that you are present in a physical room and not running a social algorithm. Here is what I want to leave you with. The men who are best at first dates and age gap dynamics are not the most confident in the conventional sense. They are the most settled. There is a real difference between those two things. Confidence can be practiced. Settled cannot be faked. A settled man does not need the date to go well in order to feel okay about himself. He would prefer it to go well. He is interested in her. He is curious about her. But his sense of who he is does not depend on her response to it. And she can feel that from the moment he walks in the door. Research on post-divorce adjustment, including a peer-reviewed 2023 study published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, found positive associations between post-traumatic growth and subjective well-being in divorced men and women. Self-esteem emerged as a mediating factor. The men who process the difficulty of a long relationship ending, rather than simply moving past it, reported stronger well-being and a more grounded sense of self afterward. The difficulty, worked through over time, became something that built on rather than merely survived. That settledness is not something you manufacture before a wine bar. It comes from the work done before the evening starts, from months or years of building a life that does not need external validation to feel real. And if you are somewhere in the middle of building that, that is exactly what this channel is here for. One final question before you go. When you walk away from a first date that did not go the way you hoped, what is the first thing that comes to you? Is it, what did I do wrong? Or is it, we just were not the right fit? Drop one word in the comments, wrong or fit. Your answer will tell you more about where you are in this process than almost anything else I could ask you. In the next video, we are going to go deeper into something that came up here. The concept of settledness and how it is genuinely different from what most dating advice calls confidence. Because there is a specific psychological pattern that develops in men who have been through genuine loss, a divorce, a long relationship ending, a serious transition, that makes them more capable of real connection than men who have never been through anything difficult. Not despite the difficulty, because of it. That is a claim worth examining carefully, and the research behind it is genuinely interesting. That video will change how you think about what you have already been through. See you there.